What many people seem to misunderstand when it comes to the front split is thinking that it is a pure flexibility exercise, when the front split actually demonstrates way more strength and coordination than it does flexibility. In fact, you can almost exclusively use strength exercises to achieve a perfect front split, and you can use the front split to build massive strength when it comes to your leg musculature and overall coordination as a bonus to all the flexibility benefits. So if you're ready, let's go and have some fun. Now, the first thing most people focus on when it comes to the front split, which I imagine is French for front split, is their hamstrings by using very classic stretching exercises such as the forward fold or the pike position. And while that is an amazing flexibility exercise for rest days, we're going to take it a step further, because what is even more effective at opening up your entire posterior chain, the Jefferson curl, very similar to the forward fold or the pike position, just adds a little bit more resistance and a ton more control and flexibility, not to mention that the strength bonuses we'll get, and we'll talk about how they really help us in detail later, are simply absolutely amazing. And that means that we can use the Jefferson curl as our only posterior chain flexibility exercise while building the massive amounts of strength that are gonna help us get into a front split much faster. Now, since we're working on our spine with added resistance, there are a handful of things to keep in mind so you do not hurt yourself. If you're still a beginner, you're not going to need to work on an elevation. You can simply just stand on the floor. Also, use the minimum amount of resistance to start out with that is going to pull you the tiniest bit deeper into this frontal stretch, because this is only half of the exercise. Most of it is reversing this movement in a very controlled fashion, which means we're gonna have to go through this for a couple of weeks until we are very safe in this movement, using resistance to go through complete spinal flexion, the rounding of the back, and complete spinal extension, leaning backwards as a tiny bonus for our glute strength and our spinal erectors, which is going to help us later. Then there's also two things you should play around with until you're totally safe in both of those movements. One, going into a very low straight leg deadlift, like a Jefferson curl with an extended back, and going into the Jefferson curl with a completely flexed and relaxed back, lowering vertebrae by vertebrae. And of course, we have to learn how to reverse both of those. The one with the extended back, which is going to give us a little bit more safety when it comes to our spinal erectors and our lumbar spine. And the rounded back, which is going to help us build a lot of strength throughout our back and working on getting stronger in a little bit compromised position. Because you've definitely heard many times before that you should never pick something up with a rounded back, but you should keep it extended and lift from your legs. And while that is true, you can start strengthening your spine in compromised positions. So even if you fall into that roundness when picking something up, you will still stay safe when you go through the movement. This way, we have stretched basically our entire posterior chain, not to mention that every muscle we just stretched got a lot of strengthening as well. Two of the major things people get wrong when it comes to the fronto split, though, which I imagine is Japanese for front split, is number one, they round in their back to come deeper and deeper into this stretching or lengthened position, and tilting their pelvis sideways to open up their hips a little bit more, which is going to compensate for a lack of flexibility in your hip flexors as well as in your hamstrings and your glutes. And to contest that, what we need is massive glute strength. And now comes the second bonus from the Jefferson curl, because we have been strengthening our glutes through extending our entire body, because our glutes are responsible for hip extension. Going through this movement simulates the exact extension we need for the front split. So when you start moving into this stretch, the first thing you're gonna do is move sideways like so. And if you're working with a wall in front of you, just imagine that you have to be parallel to said wall so you do not cheat yourself out of any sort of flexibility and strength bonuses you may get from the front split. And the second most important thing is, do not lean forward to compensate for a lack of flexibility in your hip flexors and your hams, but stay as upright as possible, flexing your glutes, and only then start lowering deeper and deeper and deeper into that stretch. Once you notice, oh, I'm folding forward or I'm turning sideways, that is too far. Just dial it back the tiniest bit, hold the stretch here, and over time you can lengthen and lengthen and lengthen more. And in this position, you're gonna have noticed that the second most important thing when it comes to lengthening our muscles and our tendons will happen in our hip flexors and surrounding our hip joint in the extension side. So grab yourself a kettlebell or any sort of weight, and the best, I mean literally the best exercise you can do to lengthen this region is a common couch stretch, because in this position our quads and our hip flexors as well as our lower abdominals are in the pretty much longest position they can get into. And once again, we're going to take this to the next level because we want to dominate when it comes to strength as well. Using the kettlebell to go into this overhead position is going to force our back into extension, which is going to help us not fall into this forward position to compensate for any lack of flexibility and any sort of tension we might carry there. Staying fully upright is going to maximize our anterior chain stretch, and this is going to move it throughout all, and I mean all of our anterior chain. Once again, we're starting now at our tibialis, moving up through our quadriceps, our hip flexors, our lower abdominals, up our upper abdominals, and even opening up our pectorals and our delts through this extension, and through moving that weight backwards more and more while arching more and more in our back. And that means that we are strengthening our hip extensors by pushing forward into this arched position, strengthening our spinal erectors, our back musculature, our shoulders and our chest a tiny bit as well, but mostly working on our posterior chain when it comes to strength and our anterior chain when it comes to flexibility. And when it comes to static stretching, hold this maximum lengthened position for 20 to 30 seconds and also add dynamic moves. Push your hips forward as much as you can to lengthen your hip flexors at the very top and then push them back, adding a tiny bit of quad strength as well. But the important thing is that by pushing our hips back, we're moving that stretch from up here all the way down here, adding even more flexibility to our quads, which is going to be very important when it comes to getting into a real front split position. And the next exercise we're going to use includes a metric shit ton of tips and tricks that will also help you advance much faster than most people. And not just when it comes to the front split, because we'll be using most people's favorite leg exercise, the famed Bulgarian split squat. And that exercise is absolutely amazing for two different reasons. Number one, we are lengthening once again our hip flexors and our quads as well as our lower abdominals, the same way we did with the couch stretch. But here is where the actual interesting thing happens. We are also working a lot on quad strength. Now, why would quad strength be important when it comes to the front split? We do not truly need to flex our quads. That is absolutely wrong. A very important mechanism of our body to understand, and if you've been here before, you've probably heard me talk about this before, is reciprocal inhibition. The flexing of a muscle used to lengthen its antagonist. Because once you start flexing a muscle, your brain has to give the signal to its antagonist to relax, or else you're just gonna rip out your tendons through your own strength. And what happens when we flex our quads? We totally relax its antagonist, meaning our hamstrings or our biceps femoris. The easiest way to test this out is just sitting down like so. Try touching your toes in a totally relaxed position by just trying to pull yourself closer like so. And then try just flexing your hip flexors, which is going to lengthen your glutes, flexing your quads, which is going to lengthen your hamstrings, and see if you can grab a little bit farther than you did before. If you have true control over those muscles, you definitely will. Because the most important thing when it comes to getting a muscle into its longest position is relaxing it. And the easiest way to relax a muscle is to flex its antagonist. Keep that in mind, and all of your stretching routines will become much more efficient. So now that we understand that, let's put all of it together. A very long lunging position, bring your hind knee to the ground and start moving your hips parallel to the wall you're working in front, which is going to lengthen your quads and lengthen your hip flexors, which means that from now on we are flexing our glutes tightly as well as our spinal erectors. And now you can start extending the front leg inch by inch by inch into this position. Hold it for a long enough period until you feel a little bit safer here. Lengthen a little bit more and lengthen a little bit more. And from here on, you're already, instead of staying fully relaxed, flexing your quads as tightly as possible to relax your hamstrings more and more. You can work with your hands on the ground once you are here. If you do not have the necessary flexibility for that, using yoga blocks or any sort of book or whatever elevation you can use for your hands is going to be very helpful. Just stay up here with your hips, flex your quads, flex your glutes, and push down. Hold this position for a short amount of time, release that stretch, and repeat. And the amount of time we're talking about is usually 30 seconds, which is the most effective time to hold a static stretch. Every now and then you can play around with tilting your hips sideways and moving forward with your upper body just to see how deeply you can get into this position before you start pushing your hips down and start squaring them once more, combining the perfect form stretch with the not so perfect form stretch, just as a small bonus, will also help you advance when it comes to doing a front split. And over time, you should be more and more comfortable in just holding this position in a very relaxed manner, which, as you can see from my face, I have not yet achieved. Now, when it comes to programming, just treat it like you would any hypertrophy training, 3 to 4 times a week with 4 sets per exercise. For the dynamic exercises, go for 30 to 40 seconds per exercise, and for the static ones, hold for 30 seconds, go through all of them, and see that you take the necessary breaks between every set and every exercise, about 1 to 2 minutes. And this will have you front splitting in absolutely no time, while building massive amounts of strength in your legs, massive amounts of coordination, because we're working on all of those asymmetrical or unilateral exercises. I'd also be interested in hearing about your front split training, how you have started advancing, and what helped you the most, because some of those tips might help someone else who is watching this video. With that said, if you like the video, and come on, subscribe. We do stuff like that almost every single day, which means that I will see you tomorrow. So until then, Captain Cairo, peace out.